right, here we go. Here's the first thrift store. Number one. I come here every 2 months. I don't know if you can see the sign, but it says 50% off all outdoor items. So you might want to rush down here and take advantage of that. I mean, there's some brand new crutches right there. Let's see what they have in the window. I know it's not 50% off, but usually in the window they have some really special items. Absolutely. And this is what we're here for. This is what we're here for. We are here for the blood donation event. And what an event, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the second thrift store. Oh, they've got some books, but some real old ones here. It's every single bookstore I go to. You know, like if they don't have a dozen copies of Memoirs of a Geisha, then they've got a dozen copies of Atonement. Oh, yeah. Hey, I want that one. So what did I say about having a dozen copies of Atonement and Memoirs of a Geisha? Oh. Oh, look, what's that back there? Oh, cribbage board. Okay, this is the last thrift store of the day, Orphan Aid. So here we are at the end of the program today. Okay, blood, as you can see. Those are my sunglasses that I also got. Oh, there's some people in there probably looking at me, smiling. This is Canada. These little box businesses. Barber, vacuum, tax, tanning, pizza, hair, restaurant, barber, nails, Mediterranean, Donair House, Wendy's, KFC. And there's where I live. The termination of all ambition. Hello. This is Grant Loves Books, and so this is the haul of books that I bought in the 3 thrift stores today. Get started because there's quite a few. Thrift store number 1, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I've never read it, and there's a reason. The reason I've never read it is because it's too big to carry home. I almost didn't buy it today because I just thought, well, I have to carry this now. 800 pages, yeah, it's big, and it's on every list in the world of greatest literature. Am I looking forward to reading it? Not particularly. I've gone this long without it. The God of Small Things, the winner of the Booker Award in 1997? 97 or 87? Well, it just, I've seen that this book exists in every Canadian thrift store and used bookstore. It is just one of the most common books you will ever see. I always have a bit of a thing with Indian literature. Poverty, corruption, filth, spousal abuse, of course, child marriage. Like I don't get too excited about Indian literature. Black Sheep by Balzac. I think so far the best book I've read this year was Balzac's Eugène Grandet. So when I saw this, I said, yeah, that I want that. I don't know if this has ever been read. I mean, the edges are sharp. It's got this weird cover. Penelope Lively, City of the Mind. I don't know if it was this year or last year that I read Penelope Lively's Moon Tiger. I think it was this year, and one of the best books I read this year as well. And I had never heard of Penelope Lively in the past, so that was a new experience for me. This one, I was so excited when I just because it was like, wow, there's that new author that is suddenly, I've got to read a lot more of. And then I checked the publication date, and it's 1991, which is after she wrote all of her best work. So will this be good? I really hope so. I'm always so hopeful for authors, but I do let them off the hook. I think it's hard to sit down and be a good writer when your bank account is flush. Like if you've already received the accolades, the awards dinners, you've already had interviews, yeah, I think it is a bit hard to sit down and say, all right, come on, let's really do the big job again. So this is a M&S, what is that? I don't know. M&S, McClellan and Stewart. It's a Canadian publishing company, and very famously, this was a really common, I had books that looked like this in high school. The author, the artistic little picture here, and the title. The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne by Brian Moore. Never, ever, ever heard of this book. Alone in her room in a Belfast boarding house, Judith Hearne is almost overwhelmed by loneliness, yet she still believes there is a chance for happiness, and she waits patiently for the moment when her life will turn from sorrowful longing to joy. By chance, she meets a man, the man, and her dreams take on a brighter hue, only to be dashed once more. With skill and gentle insight, Moore depicts the disintegration of Judith Hearne's last illusions. I like books about old people reflecting on their life. I think that is one of my favorite things. Maybe I like sad things quite a lot, but and also look, perfectly brand new book. So those 5 books right there cost me $5. All right, thrift store number 2. Not as good. A lot of Canadian stuff though, a lot of Canadian stuff. When I lived in Budapest, it was impossible to get Canadian novels. So in Canada, I always get this excitement when I see Canadian novels. But you know, whenever I see this cover, I'm like, oh, that's the Canadian one. And I always pick it up. Unless it's Margaret Atwood, and then I don't touch it. Shakespeare, As You Like It. Every year, I read one Shakespeare play. And last year I read 2. In the summer I read a comedy, in the winter I read a tragedy. And I want to continue that, 2. Although it's the end of September right now, and I still haven't read my Shakespeare comedy for the summer. Don't be afraid of Shakespeare. 5 acts. Read 1 act a day. And there you go. You've read your 1 Shakespeare play for the year. I want to do 2. I'm almost finished all the tragedies, which are the best. The tragedies are the best. The comedies I really don't like. And the histories, some are okay, some are not. Another Shakespeare. This is a 3-in-1 here. Measure for Measure, All's Well That Ends Well, and Troilus and Cressidia. It's kind of a shit copy, but it's 3 plays for $1. So Doris Lessing, Briefing for a Descent into Hell. I think I've read Doris Lessing before. What did I read? Was she the one that wrote The Golden Notebook? I think she wrote The Golden Notebook. And she wrote some science fiction stuff. Doris Lessing mixes fantasy and realism, one of the most important novels of our age. It's on my big list, the 1000 best books to read. Of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. I've read this a very long time ago, and I remember I enjoyed it quite a lot. This is the one that's semi-autobiographical. It's about the young man who becomes a doctor. Man, I've read a lot of Somerset Maugham. I love his stuff. Like, his stuff is, I don't think I've been disappointed. I read already Cakes and Ale, and I wasn't too satisfied with that. But The Moon and Sixpence will always be one of my favorites. Of Human Bondage, I think this is the one where the young doctor student falls in love with a really trashy woman who sort of just takes his money, and then she has another boyfriend, which really, whoa. I remember when I read that, if this is the same one, that like just the, you know, seething with the injustice of the situation. Like, he's so sensitive and he gives her the money. He just wants to love her. And she runs off to her fancy man. So I've read this one, but I think it's time to read it again. And this big one, Anne Marie MacDonald, Fall on Your Knees. I read this in 1997 or 1998. I had a girlfriend who loved this book, and she buy me a copy? She might have. This is a Canadian novel. I believe this is Anne Marie MacDonald's first novel. Oh, look at that. author picture right there. Look at that angry young lady. No photos! I despise photos. I do want to make a review of this one in the future, but I haven't read it for 25 years. I just remember there's a lot of very dirty sex. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I have a Patreon page where I have a weekly update. I have some photos that I'm posting, and I make some patron-only videos for people who support me on Patreon. And the videos I make on Patreon, I try to make them a little bit more dirty books. Why? Well, because you pay to support me on my YouTube channel, and I want to show you the filth. The first video I made for Patreon was like something like this. It was a book haul. The second Patreon video I made was a Portnoy's Complaint by Philip Roth, which is amazing literature, but dirty. And the third Patreon-only video I made was a Canadian writer. I'll just show you the cover. That one. Yeah. So even though you're sitting there thinking, Grant, why should we support you? Why should we give you money? Well, please, because I'm only asking for $3 a month, and that's really not a lot of money. I'm living in near poverty. I spend all of my money on books and beer, $10 a month. Break out the credit card, and you're gonna get those extra special Patreon-only videos. And I'm trying to make them good. It's dirty. I remember it really. Like, there's some weird sexual stuff in this one. I mean, even the cover, God, it looks like a stroke book, doesn't it? I don't know, someone should tell Anne-Marie MacDonald that she's gonna write a stroke book. Not to make it so big, because you've got to be able to read it one-handed, if you take my meaning. And the last bookstore, thrift store, charity store, and all of a sudden I took a second look, and what did I find? Philip Roth's first book. It's beat up, and it stinks of must, but it's still a fairly good condition. Somebody's thrown it into something. And look at that handsome devil. Look at that handsome devil. Someone should call Anne-Marie MacDonald and say, Miss MacDonald, have you seen Philip Roth's author portrait? Stunning. So that is why I occasionally do not mind going down to Vancouver and spending a whack of money on books, because those 5 books were $5. These 5 books were actually $4 because it was buy 4 books, get 1 free. And this was $1. So I got 11 books for $10. Don't forget, for $10 a month, you could support me on Patreon, and that would be a really nice thing to do. That balances out the gross expenses of the books that I bought a couple of months ago. Okay, so that is I'll tell you a little bit about giving blood if you like, but you don't have to listen to that part. So that's the end of the book buying spree for today. Those are the 3 thrift stores that I go to, and the number 2 and number 3, I think I've exhausted for a couple of months, but number 1, like I said, I just go there every 2 months to give blood, and it's across the street, and they just always seem to have a load of good books. I don't know what it is about that shop where they just keep absorbing good literature. Sometimes it makes me sad. I think to myself, where do these books come from? And I suppose that they are the remnants of a dead person's collection. Most often, not in every case. Sometimes people are moving, they're leaving home, they're going to another country, whatever, but Grant loves books. Grant loves used books. I am getting to the age where everything annoys me, absolutely everything. I think some people who know me will say, Grant, you've been that age for a very long time. But I can't give up the charity shops. I mean, look at these books. I got 11 books today. If you want to leave a comment down below which books you would like to see reviews for, I may or may not pay attention to that, but why don't you leave a comment? Say, Grant, I'd really like to hear a review about that book, or if you don't do a full review, at least let us know what you thought of that. But don't ask for Anna Karenina, because that's going to be way at the bottom of the list. Way at the bottom. Okay, so like, subscribe if you haven't already. Please leave a comment. Tell me which one you like. Support me on Patreon. This is Grant. Loves books, used books. Stay tuned. Don't drink beer when you make a video. Don't drink alcohol when you're making videos because you just ramble, you get distracted, you say dumb things, your lips get all wet. Hang on. Don't do it. Oh, here's a motorcyclist. That might be of interest. Here he comes. Look at him. There is a weekend warrior. Living for the weekend. Yep. Because you got to have a big belly when you're on a Harley Davidson. Come on, you'd look ridiculous, you know, if you were... Can you imagine if you put like an Olympic diver or a gymnast or a pole vaulter on a Harley Davidson? I mean, they probably would just refuse to sell you one. I like to give them a little money because I think that it's a good cause. There is such a problem with orphans in this area. I mean, if you put your knapsack down for 5 minutes, before you know it, you're going to go home, you're going to open your knapsack, and you're going to have 2 or 3 orphans inside. Like, once you have orphans in your apartment, there's just no getting rid of them. So I really do try to do what I can for orphans, because they're a fucking nuisance. Anyway, so let me just finish telling you about the blood story, because I didn't. So I went in to give blood. There was the usual rigmarole. Which arm do you want, left or right? I said, well, left. You know, just in case I have to fight off some hoodlums later, you know, to keep my right arm strong. And so one of the senior nurses came over and she said, we've got some trainee nurses here today. Would it be okay with you if she did the needle stabbing? And everything inside me cried out, please God, no. Please, no. And I said, of course. Oh, she said, she's a trained phlebotomist. I think that was the word she used. And I thought, well, that sounds correct, but I mean, you could have a 1-hour video training session and still be considered technically a trained phlebotomist, like just literally, right? So she came over and, you know, her movements were very jerky, you know, because it takes time to develop that smoothness of motion, which is, I guess, you know, that graceful movement of someone who's been doing their job for a long time. So she was quite, I was like, oh, Christ. I don't mind too much if it hurts, just please don't have blood squirting out like in a cheap horror film. And so then there was this big thing about finding a vein, and they have a hard time finding a vein because I almost always give blood on my left arm. And so she took this thing, it was like a little plastic cylinder, and she was marking the vein. And I was watching her do it, and the nurse said, oh, this is a tool for locating the vein in your arm. And I was like, it's a cocktail straw. It's a plastic cylinder. It's a cocktail straw. I can see what it is. I used to be a bartender. And so anyway, she did the mark, and then she put it in, and then she put it in a little deeper. And I was like, wow, okay, come on. You don't need to have the whole needle up in there. Anyway, she got it in. And then, so that was painful. And, you know, the trained nurses, they really get it in. Like, you know, it's just like zip. It's, you know, it doesn't feel nice, but it's the minimal pain you can get because you know, it's if you've ever only been inoculated with the vaccine, those needles are tiny. You know, it's just like, it's a tiny little mosquito. And these needles are a lot larger because they need to suck out the human juice. So the needles are much, they have a wider circumference, so that they hurt more. Anyway, so she dug it in there and got the blood out. And then she came back, and it was like, she jerked the needle out of my arm with about as much force as you would use if you were trying to pull out a really well-placed javelin. She really went rip. I was like, oh, honey. Easy, easy. It's like when you're pulling a plug out of the wall, you actually reach it at the plug point. You don't pull it out by the cord. So I actually jerked it out, and it was like, wow, okay. So I know that tomorrow I'm gonna have bruises on my arm. And then I went over to the rest station where I can get my free cookies and biscuits. And I always like to take a bunch because my girlfriend likes them. And I always feel a little bit badly because I know I'm taking a little bit extra more than other people are taking. But I don't care. I just gave you half a liter of my blood. Please, you can be a bit free with the biscuits. But always those old women who are there, like they're there because not to monitor your, like how many cookies you're taking. They're there to alert the nurses for the people who pass out, because people pass out regularly. They have a pass out station. But they're just watching you. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at him. Oh, he's putting them into his bag. Look, he took 4 biscuits and look, oh my God, I'm gonna say something. Oh, well, old women, ladies in Canada, if you take them all, there's not gonna be enough left for the other people. So don't take them all. You gotta leave some for everybody. I know, but my girlfriend likes them. I don't really like Oreo cookies. I don't like those biscuits. I bring them home to keep the happy home life.